Let me ask you something powerful right from the start. Why is it that two people can have the same goals, the same opportunities, the same resources, yet end up with completely different lives? Why does one break through while the other keeps struggling year after year, repeating the same patterns? It's not because one wants it more. It's not because one dreams bigger, and it's definitely not because one has more potential. The real difference comes down to one word that most people never take seriously enough: standards. Results are never random, and they are never an accident. They are feedback. They are the visible evidence of the invisible standards you live by every single day. Most people believe results come from motivation, talent, luck, or circumstances, but those are surface-level explanations that avoid the deeper truth. Results come from what you demand of yourself consistently, not occasionally. They come from the minimum level of behavior you're willing to accept as normal, especially when no one is watching and when it would be easier to quit, delay, or lower the bar. Think about how standards work in everyday life. If someone has a standard that they never miss workouts no matter how busy they are, their body reflects that commitment over time. If someone has a standard that they communicate honestly and don't tolerate disrespect, their relationships reflect that strength. If someone has a standard that they show up prepared, focused, and disciplined at work, their career reflects that professionalism. The outcome is not magic, it is alignment. The outer world simply catches up to the inner rules you've set for yourself. Many people confuse goals with standards, and that confusion keeps them stuck. A goal is something you want, but a standard is something you live. A goal can be postponed, negotiated, or forgotten when things get uncomfortable. A standard does not negotiate, it defines who you are. When your standard says, "This is who I am and how I operate," your behavior follows automatically. You don't need to hype yourself up or wait for the right mood. You act because acting any other way would violate your identity. This is why two people can chase the same result and experience completely different outcomes. One treats discipline as optional, the other treats it as non-negotiable. One tolerates excuses, the other finds them unacceptable. One lowers expectations when pressure rises, the other raises their level of focus and commitment. Over time, these small differences compound into massive gaps in results, not because of intelligence or resources, but because of standards. Standards are revealed most clearly in moments of difficulty. When you're tired, stressed, rejected, or afraid, your true standard shows up. Do you push through or pull back? Do you hold the line or make an exception? Do you keep your word to yourself or break it quietly and move on? Every one of those moments is casting a vote for the kind of results you will live with in the future. The most empowering truth is that this puts control back in your hands. If results reflect standards, then changing results begins with raising the standards you live by. Not dramatically all at once, but decisively and honestly. It starts by identifying what you've been tolerating that no longer serves you. The moment you stop accepting a lower level of performance, energy, focus, or integrity, your actions must rise to meet the new expectation. Results do not require you to become a different person overnight. They require you to decide what is no longer acceptable and commit to a higher level of consistency. When your standards change, your choices change. When your choices change, your habits change. When your habits change, your results have no option but to follow. Standards are not formed by what you say you want. They are formed by what you are willing to put up with day after day. You can declare big dreams, speak powerful affirmations, and visualize a better future. But if you continue to tolerate behaviors, environments, and thoughts that pull you backward, your standards remain low. Life responds not to your words, but to your tolerance. Whatever you allow to stay in your life becomes the blueprint for what you believe you deserve. Most people don't consciously choose low standards. They drift into them. They slowly accept conditions that once would have been unacceptable. They tolerate exhaustion instead of demanding energy. They tolerate disrespect instead of insisting on honesty and boundaries. They tolerate inconsistency instead of committing to discipline. Over time, what was once temporary becomes normal, and what becomes normal eventually feels unchangeable. This is how people get stuck without realizing when it happened. Tolerance is powerful because it operates quietly. You don't announce it, you justify it. You say things like, "It's not that bad. This is just how things are right now," or "I'll deal with it later." But later becomes months, then years. Every time you tolerate something that drains you, you reinforce a standard that says this level of life is acceptable. Once something is acceptable, it stops demanding change. Look closely at your emotional patterns because they reveal your standards more honestly than your goals ever will. If you tolerate feeling overwhelmed all the time, stress becomes your normal. If you tolerate self-doubt, it becomes the voice that guides your decisions. If you tolerate frustration without taking action, it turns into resignation. Emotional tolerance shapes identity, and identity shapes behavior. This is why change feels so hard for so many people, because they're trying to change behavior without addressing what they have been accepting internally. The same principle applies to the people you surround yourself with. If you tolerate negativity, excuses, and small thinking in your environment, it quietly lowers your standards. You begin to match the emotional and behavioral tone around you, not because you are weak, but because humans adapt. What you tolerate externally eventually becomes what you tolerate within yourself. This is why raising standards often requires changing boundaries, conversations, and sometimes even relationships. The shift happens when you decide that certain things are no longer acceptable, not because they are painful, but because they are beneath the life you are committed to creating. Pain alone doesn't change standards. People tolerate pain all the time. What changes standards is the decision that something violates who you are and who you are becoming. When that line is crossed, tolerance disappears and action begins. Raising standards is not about being harsh or unrealistic. It's about being honest. Honest about what drains you, what distracts you, and what keeps you playing small. The moment you stop tolerating excuses, your behavior changes. The moment you stop tolerating low energy, you start taking care of your body. The moment you stop tolerating disrespect, your communication becomes stronger and clearer. Your life always reflects the lowest standard you allow to remain. If you want a different future, start by identifying what you have been tolerating and make a firm decision that it no longer belongs in your life. When tolerance ends, standards rise. When standards rise, everything else is forced to change with them. Lasting transformation does not begin with a burst of emotion or a surge of motivation. It begins with a decision so clear and so firm that there is no room left for negotiation. Real change happens when you raise the minimum of what you will accept for yourself, not just on your best days, but on your hardest ones. The moment you decide that a certain level of effort, integrity, focus, or self-respect is no longer optional, your entire system begins to reorganize around that decision. Most people try to change their lives by adding more effort on top of old standards. They push harder for a few days, maybe a few weeks, and then fall back into familiar patterns. That happens because effort without a change in standards is temporary. Standards are the rules you live by, and rules don't rely on mood. When your standard says, "This is who I am now," your actions follow whether you feel inspired or not. You don't debate with yourself because the decision has already been made. Raising your standards means redefining what failure and success look like for you. Failure is no longer not achieving a big goal someday. Failure becomes breaking a promise to yourself today. Success is no longer a distant outcome. Success becomes showing up at the level you committed to, even when it's uncomfortable. This shift changes everything because it brings power back into the present moment. You stop waiting for conditions to improve and start demanding more from yourself where you are. This process often feels uncomfortable at first because higher standards expose old habits. When you raise the bar, excuses that once felt reasonable suddenly feel weak. Patterns you once justified start to stand out. That discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It's evidence that growth is happening. You are shedding an old identity and stepping into a stronger one. And that transition always creates tension. The key is consistency, not intensity. Raising standards doesn't mean you have to be perfect. It means you are no longer willing to consistently operate below your potential. When you slip, you correct quickly. You don't spiral into guilt or self-judgment. You realign. The standard remains firm even when performance temporarily dips. Over time, this creates trust with yourself, and self-trust is the foundation of confidence. As your standards rise, your environment begins to shift as well. You make different choices about how you spend your time, who you listen to, and what you focus on. Distractions lose their grip because they no longer match your identity. Discipline becomes simpler because you are protecting a standard, not forcing yourself to behave. What once required effort now feels natural. This is why lasting change is always an inside job. You don't wait for proof from the outside world to validate your new standard. You live it first. Results follow later. The internal decision comes before external evidence. When you raise the minimum of what you will accept in your thoughts, actions, and emotions, life has no option but to respond differently. Transformation is not about becoming someone else. It is about deciding at the deepest level that you will no longer live beneath the person you are capable of being. The moment that decision becomes real, your standards rise, and when your standards rise, lasting change becomes inevitable. Every action you take is driven by how you see yourself. Long before behavior shows up, identity is already at work. You don't consistently act in ways that contradict who you believe you are. This is why identity, not willpower, is the real engine behind lasting results. When your standards rise, they reshape your identity, and when identity shifts, behavior follows naturally and powerfully. Most people try to change their behavior without changing how they see themselves. They say things like, "I'm trying to be disciplined," or "I'm trying to be confident," which quietly reinforces the belief that discipline and confidence are not who they are. Standards work differently. A standard is a declaration of identity. When you set a standard, you are saying, "This is who I am and how I live." From that place, action becomes an expression of self, not a struggle against it. Think about the difference between someone who says, "I'm trying to eat healthy," and someone who says, "I don't eat that." The second statement reflects identity and standard, not effort. There's no inner debate, no need for motivation. The behavior is automatic because it aligns with how the person defines themselves. This is the power of identity-based standards. They remove friction from action and replace it with clarity. When your identity is aligned with higher standards, momentum becomes inevitable. You begin to stack small wins because your actions are consistent. Consistency builds confidence, and confidence reinforces identity. This creates a positive feedback loop where each step forward makes the next step easier. Over time, what once felt difficult becomes normal, and what once felt impossible starts to feel within reach. Lower standards create the opposite effect. When identity is tied to excuses, inconsistency, or self-doubt, every action requires force. You are constantly negotiating with yourself, constantly starting over, constantly relying on bursts of motivation that never last. This drains energy and reinforces the belief that change is hard. It's not change that's hard. It's living with standards that don't match who you want to become. Raising standards interrupts this cycle. It draws a clear line between who you have been and who you are choosing to be. That clarity creates power. When you know who you are, decisions become simpler. You say no more easily. You focus more deeply. You recover faster from setbacks because your identity is not up for debate. You are not proving yourself. You are expressing yourself. Momentum is not something you chase. It is something you create by aligning identity, standards, and action. The smallest disciplined action taken from a place of identity carries enormous weight. It sends a message to your nervous system that you are a person who follows through. That message compounds over time into unshakable self-belief. This is how ordinary people create extraordinary lives. Not by waiting for confidence, but by acting in alignment with higher standards until confidence is built. Identity evolves through action, and action is guided by standards. When these three are aligned, progress accelerates and power becomes a natural state rather than a temporary feeling. You do not need more motivation to move forward. You need a clearer decision about who you are and what you stand for. The moment your standards reflect the identity you are committed to living, your behavior will rise to meet them, and momentum will carry you further than motivation ever could. When standards rise, excuses lose their power. Excuses only survive in environments where the bar is low enough to step over without effort. The moment you demand more from yourself, the stories you use to justify an action begin to fall apart. Not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because those excuses no longer fit the identity you have chosen to live from. Most excuses sound reasonable on the surface. They are wrapped in logic, timing, and circumstances. You tell yourself you'll start when things calm down, when you feel more confident, when you have more time, more money, or more support. But beneath every excuse is a standard that says effort is conditional. As long as conditions control your behavior, progress will always be delayed. Higher standards remove conditions. They create action first, clarity second. When your standards are low, Excuses feel like protection. They protect you from discomfort, from failure, and sometimes from success. They allow you to stay in familiar territory even when it no longer serves you. But familiarity is not growth. Comfort is not progress. The cost of excuses is paid quietly over time in the form of regret, self-doubt, and unrealized potential. Raising standards does not mean denying pity. It means refusing to let reality dictate your identity. You may still face challenges, setbacks, and uncertainty, but your response changes. Instead of asking, "Can I do this?" you ask, "What will it take?" That shift alone dismantles most excuses. You stop looking for reasons to pause and start looking for ways to move. As excuses fall away, action becomes simpler and more direct. You stop overthinking and start executing. You don't wait for perfect conditions because your standard is to act with what you have. You don't wait for confidence because your standard is to move despite fear. You don't wait for approval because your standard is self-respect. Each action reinforces the belief that you are capable, disciplined, and in control. This is where real power is built. Power is not intensity. It is consistency. It is the ability to follow through even when no one is watching, even when progress feels slow, even when doubt whispers in your ear. High standards create this kind of power because they eliminate the mental debate that drains energy. You act because that is what you do. There is no alternative to consider. Over time, this consistency compounds. Small actions stack into habits. Habits shape character. Character produces results that look extraordinary from the outside but feel inevitable from the inside. People may call it confidence or discipline, but what they are really seeing is the outcome of elevated standards lived daily. When excuses disappear, responsibility takes their place. Responsibility is not a burden, it is freedom. It means you no longer outsource your future to circumstances. You claim ownership of your actions, your mindset, and your direction. From that place, momentum builds naturally because every step forward reinforces your sense of agency. The moment you raise your standards, life responds differently. Opportunities appear because you are prepared to meet them. Challenges strengthen you because you no longer avoid them. Action becomes your default, not your exception. When excuses fall and standards rise, the results you once chased begin to follow you instead.